Good morning. Welcome back to our third Anchored in the Word morning reflection, and hope that you'll join us this Wednesday as we dig into 1 Corinthians again. And I hope that the study in 1 Corinthians has been an encouragement to you. The passage that we've been working our way through is the story of Christ on the road to Emmaus. And today we are going to focus in on this mysterious unknown guest. We know who he is. It's Christ. But these two disciples did not know who he was. And so we're going to see how Christ relates to these two disciples who at the time do not have the ability to see who he is. So let's go to our Bibles again, Luke chapter 24, and we'll pick up in verse 13. It says, "Behold, two of them went that day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs. They talked together of all these things which had happened, and it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these that ye have one with another, as ye walk, and are sad? One of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said unto him, Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem? Hast thou not known the things which are come to pass there in these days?" Now, as we dig into this passage, we're going to see that a mysterious guest comes upon these two individuals as they're talking. We see this, and there are two things that are said about it. One is that they communed, and the two is that they reasoned. So when we say that they communed and they reasoned, the idea is this is a very intense conversation. There's a lot of going back and forth. There's a lot of discussion about what is really happening here. It's almost like when a person has experienced something that has really affected them mentally, emotionally. They don't know how to process it, and so they're talking through this with a friend who's trying to really help them make sense of this, but it's not a person who is not thinking clearly talking to someone who is thinking clearly. This is two people who are not thinking clearly talking to each other. And so they communed and reasoned. And then in verse 17, when Christ speaks to them, he says, "Why are you so sad?" So we can see that they're not just intensely having a conversation here, but they have this sense of hopelessness. They feel like all hope has been lost. And Christ communicates that when he talks to them. The second thing I want you to notice here is that Christ is the one who takes the first step. He interrupted them, not the other way around. It's not like here is Christ, he's walking on the road by himself, and these two people come across to him and they start talking to him and they start asking him questions about the situation in Jerusalem. We're not talking about that at all. They are talking amongst themselves. They can't make sense of it between themselves. And what does Jesus do? He interrupts them. Verse 17, it says, "What manner of communication are these that ye have one with another as ye walk and are sad?" A couple of points I want to make note of here. The first is this. God always takes the first step. We do not seek the Lord. As it says in Romans chapter 3, there is none that understandeth, and there is none that seeketh after God. So the question is, how do people become Christians? Well, they become Christians because God goes to them. We even see the story of this in Genesis chapter 3 when Adam and Eve sinned. What's the very first thing that they did? They ran from God. They tried to hide from him. They tried to cover their shame and their nakedness. And Christ goes to them, or God goes to them in the cool of the day, and he says, "Where are you, Adam? Why are you doing this?" Second thing we see is that he always asks questions. Why does he do this? Because questions awaken conscience. Questions lead us to what is at the not at the surface, but what's at the heart, or what's at the foundation of our thinking and our beliefs. And so he initiates it, he asks questions, and he asks the right questions so that they will lead to the right conclusions about the foundation. Let's go kind of in some other details. The first that we see here, beyond that Christ has interrupted them, is that when he communicates that he acts as if he doesn't know what's happened. These people are shocked. They're like, how in the world is it possible for you to not know about what's happened in Jerusalem? He says, "Art thou a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known these things which have come to pass in these days?" He said unto them, "What things?" Well, these events had literally turned the city upside down. You had people that were saying, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," on the first day of the week. And by the end of the week, people are saying that he's risen. And a couple days before, he is standing before Pilate, and they're saying, "Crucify him, his blood be on us and our children." So you want to talk about a lot of turmoil and a lot of talk within the city. a lot of people are going, what in the world's going on? It was impossible for someone who had been in Jerusalem to not know about what had taken place. The whole city knew who Jesus was, they knew what had happened, and they knew the stories that people were spreading around the city that in fact he is not dead, but he's alive. We also see that this narration of events establishes quite a few facts about how these two people, though they didn't understand the situation, how they interpreted the situation. For instance, they identify the person that is the focal point of this. They identify Christ by name. They said, this is concerning Jesus of Nazareth. This is a real person. Everybody knows who he is. They establish that fact. Secondly, they affirm that he has been having a public ministry that involves authoritative preaching and teaching and miracles that are demonstrating his claim to be the Messiah. He was a prophet mighty indeed, speaking of miracles, and in word before God and all the people. He spoke with authority, and they are demonstrating that. They affirm that the cause of the crucifixion was the chief priests and the rulers delivered him to be condemned, and they crucified him. And so they know that in fact there was a behind-the-scenes cabal to get Christ to be crucified by the Romans. They communicated the content of their faith. Verse 21, we trusted that it had been he which had redeemed Israel. Interestingly, they believed he was the Messiah, but they didn't understand how he was going to do this. And that's really where the complication lies. They didn't understand that there's a cross and an empty tomb before the kingdom and the crowning of that kingdom. But they believed that he was the one. And in fact, that belief was correct. They also communicated their brokenness, their confusion, their doubts. It says, beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Certain women have also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre when they found not his body. They came saying they'd seen a vision which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre and found it even so as the women had said, but they did not see him. Now, interestingly, there's nothing in those words that would give you the impression that they believed it was true. They knew the tomb was empty. They knew that the women were correct in saying he's not there, but they didn't believe the women's explanation. They were astonished. It never says they believed that he was risen. So then that leads us to really the key component here. How does Christ respond? Christ's response is very direct. O fools, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things, to have entered into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Basically what Jesus is doing is he is preaching the gospel from the Old Testament. He's saying you should have anticipated this. This is what was foretold by the prophets. That's what he means when he says, ought not Christ to have suffered and to have entered into a glory? Beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounds in all the scriptures these things concerning himself. It would have been incredible to listen to Christ do this. This is the same kind of thing that the Apostle Paul would have done when he went into synagogues and he preached the gospel in the various cities where churches were established. And I don't know what passages he went to, but I can't imagine that he would have not gone to this passage here, because this is the most thorough of all the passages in Scripture in articulating the redemptive nature of Christ's ministry. He would be wounded for our transgressions. He would be bruised for our iniquities. The Lord would lay on him the iniquity of us all. His soul would become an offering for sin. He would justify many. He would bear their iniquities. We see that Christ becomes our substitute. He takes our place. He takes our sin. He takes our guilt. He is punished in our place. And through his death, our sin is removed. The debt we owe has been paid in full, and now we can be forgiven and cleansed and justified. And it's all because of what Christ has done. And so when we think about Christ interrupting them, it was about explaining the gospel to these people who understood the Messiah was him, but they didn't understand what he had come to do. May God help us to really reflect deeply on this today and to be encouraged as we think about these wonderful truths in relation to the gospel. Well, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach directly out to me. I want to be a help, an encouragement anyway. If this has been a challenge to you and a blessing, share that. If you think somebody else could be benefited by it, please take a moment to share that. And Lord willing, we will see many of you tonight at Bible study. Bye now.